Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to get it right.
I'm Megan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mums. But that's a good thing because between us we've got over 40 years experience and we are going to share with you bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together we're going to make sure that you get unbiased and real information that you can rely on so you can get where you want to be without missing a step.
Now, we've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au. There you'll find free checklists that you can download, a free mini course on how to price a property, and our Where to Buy workshop for only $39. Priceless stuff, really.
Bargain. But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, here's the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field of expertise. Now, we've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording, but things change. So check with the relevant government authority or your advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Local knowledge is so important when buying property, and today we're talking to two local experts who are going to share their tips on what first home buyers need to be looking for and the mistakes that can be avoided in each of their areas. Our guest buyers agents are Tony Coughran from Simply Gold Coast and Karen Young from Property Zest on the Sunshine Coast. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
I want to be where Karen is.
Yeah, I tried to get something like the Sunshine Coast. I haven't actually seen those boats on the sunny coast, so
it's pretty flat there. Is that like around the? It's certainly not Noosa because it's facing the wrong way.
No, it's Pumice Passage.
Pumice Passage.
Yeah. Okay, I have to interrupt because for anyone who's actually listening to this podcast, not watching the video, Megan is commenting on Karen's very it's getting me envious. She's got this amazing backdrop which just looks so tropical and gorgeous.
That's where we all want to be, apart from Hedges Avenue. As everybody knows who's done the course or listened to the podcast, I want to be on Hedges Avenue, Tony, but I'm going to have fairly deep pockets to do that, aren't I?
Well, yeah, you could be there 100 metres away in the five, so...
That's the 5 millions, just in case you're wondering, not the 500.
Right.
Now, let's talk.
We're talking first home buyers. Yes. No.
Everybody can dream, and it's really good to have a dream, isn't it? That's mine, and one day it might be. So let's talk first home buyers, though. We're really interested. So in these regional spotlights, we're really interested in what first home buyers are buying in your area. Now, Karen, you're going through quite a boom up on the Sunshine Coast, and particularly in this, at Sunshine Beach is quite phenomenal in early 2021. Yeah. Tell us what can a first home buyer buy around your area?
Look, I think firstly, it depends on what they want. Like some first home buyers, obviously, they want the lifestyle and the location, and others want the nice house, the pretty house, the new house. So, and we can cater for both up here. So there are some big areas of development, like new suburb development in parts of Caloundra South, and that's a very big master plan community going in there. And so a lot of first home buyers are looking at things like that, which are new houses, because it's exciting to get something spanking new. And there's a lot of new facilities, there's new schools, there's new universities, there's new commercial areas. So that's a whole new thing going on. So a lot of first home buyer interest in places like that and other sort of, similar, suburbs, new estate type suburbs. And then you've got the other people who are more about the lifestyle and want to be closer to the water. And for those people, they're looking more at an older house so that they can get themselves closer to the water. Something that maybe, they can renovate and things like that, but they're really focused on location. So they're the main two types of buyer that we see with home buyers, first home buyers.
And how affordable is an older style house sort of closer to the beaches?
Yeah, look, it's tricky. It's going up, and whereas we used to be able to sneak in just under 500, within 2 k's of the beach there, particularly in that sort of more southern stretch towards sort of Caloundra, between Caloundra and Mooloolaba. There's a stretch of beachside property there, and you could sneak in there under 500. Those days are gone, unfortunately. And realistically, entry-level pricing there for a renovator is more sort of, mid-5s would be the very lowest we see now. And even that would be on a busier street or backing onto a busier street and things like that. So unless you've got sort of 6+, it's very difficult to get that close to the beach in a house I'm talking about.
Interesting. So southern end. Now, master plan communities, it's something that Veronica and I are very cautious about and do talk to first home buyers about being very careful. Are these kinds of areas that you've mentioned, are they kind of limited in how much is going to be released into them, or is there a lot of land that surrounds these areas that might also be subdivided and turned into housing?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of different sort of, estates that have popped up here. There's one up at Palmview that's more limited. There's sort of like a 5,000 home type development there. But the big one in Caloundra South that it's called Aura, that's big. Like that's 40,000 plus type thing. And it's in early phases.
Supply.
There is 40 years of development in this thing to go. So look, personally, it's not an area where I sort of try and steer people toward areas that I think will have better growth. Mm-hmm. But for some people, it's more about facilities and a new house. So, yes, it will have great facilities there and those things will all come along. But, they're very small block sizes in many cases, and I just don't foresee great growth there for a long time.
Sounds like an area where you'd need a lot of expert advice so you don't end up buying
well, that's the thing. People jump on. Exactly. They get taken with the pretty photos and look, they're nice houses, when they're brand new, but, they're squeezing 4x2x2 or 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car on like 180 square metres of land. And,
really?
It's just like, it's small. It's really small. And I don't see, it's very high density living. The streets are narrow, so you end up with a lot of cars in the street. So these places look great when they're shiny,
lots
but
of
5 years down
there, isn't there?
Yeah, 5 years down the track, it doesn't look as appealing. So
sort of almost, Tony sounds a little bit like Ormo, doesn't it? Like sort of that stretch between the Gold Coast and Brisbane when that was developed a few years ago and still is being developed.
Yeah, even Pimpamar. Yeah,
Pimpamar,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why.
I'm mortified because, it's such a lot of house on such a tiny block of land.
And here we go.
I know. Hang on a minute.
Somebody's got to launch into this rant.
But they're not.
We're all thinking it, but
we're all yelling at the same. We're all yelling. It's like yelling at the television. This one. But the thing is, right? You're moving quite a long way from a capital city. The idea of having a sea change or a tree change is to have all this space and this lovely quality of life, and then you go and squish yourself on a tiny block of land with too much house and little skinny roads and cars everywhere. Doesn't sound very appealing to me.
Yeah. And look, I sometimes people, when I talk to people, I try and work out what their driving factor is, and sometimes it is that brand new house. They want the brand new house and they're going to go the estate. And then I think if they're going to do that anyway, there are things you can try and do to mitigate risk and to help put yourself. So, make sure you go for the larger, block of land, or make sure you've got better features. Don't buy the 3-bedroom, 1-car garage in this estate full of 4x2s, things like that. I try and counsel people toward if that is their chosen way of going. But, it's not necessarily mine.
Eyes wide open. What are they buying down the Gold Coast, Tony? What are first-time buyers getting into, and how much does it cost them?
Yeah, okay. Well, for first home buyers, I wasn't kidding when you were talking about being close to Hedges and Mermaid Beach. Literally in the 5s, Dan and Jess just purchased a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 2-car accommodation in the basement, and they're going to convert the laundry to a second bathroom. So
that's Veronica's favourite strategy for apartments.
Yeah, well,
singing from the same songbook.
Veronica. So, look, that has real upside. So when we're looking for the first home buyers, it's a big step. You want to make sure that you're going to, catapult into the property trajectory and see that there is some upside. Otherwise, why are you buying a property? Don't just buy 4 walls on a, small block and be squished in and be in a cookie cutter estate. Look for that significant point of difference. What is it, and what style of property are you looking for? Look,
so that's a bit more of a lifestyle, isn't it? Because for anyone who doesn't know, Hedges Avenue is one of the few streets in the Gold Coast where the properties are actually on the beach side of the street as opposed to the opposite side of the street. So that's I guess where the draw card is for that. But it's sort of right in that surface paradise kind of pocket, isn't it, Tony? And there's a lot going on around that area. So you're talking about a big lifestyle precinct there with limited supply.
Yeah, well, we're in a real lifestyle-driven market here at the Gold Coast, like you would be there, Karen, the sunny coast. So you do have to ask yourself, what is your budget? What can you afford? And I'll tell every first home buyer or client, it doesn't matter how little or how much or how little you have. I'd always do the best to push you into a house first. We've got that land contact, that capital growth. And don't worry, guys, if you can't afford a house, there are other alternatives, like a duplex. There's no body corporates. You're one or two. You might call them semis down south. At Coomera, 5 minutes from the Broadwater at Paradise Point, Sandra, a first home buyer from Melbourne, she secured a duplex. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath, single lock-up garage. It was only on the market for 1 day, but that was $377,000. So you don't need a great deal of money to
How far from the beach was that, Tony?
5 minutes drive to Paradise Point Village, where the Broadwater is. If you wanted to drive to the beach, you'd drive to Main Beach. That'd be about 22 minutes drive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can we just get a bit clear on what a duplex is? So when you say semi, it's funny how some people say, oh, you can buy a house, but if you can't get a house, get a duplex. Whereas in Sydney, I'd say a semi is a house, guys. A terrace is a house. Just because it shares walls doesn't mean it's not a house. So there's a bit of terminology change that happens across the country. But is a duplex, when would it have been built originally?
This particular one were being built in probably around that 1990 era. So about 30 years old. You'll find a lot of duplexes are in, medium density areas where the action is, and they're in good locations, How
much land would that one have, Tony? What sort of land content are we talking there?
Yeah,
because you mentioned there's no body corporate.
Yeah, that one would have been on a 600 parent parcel. So divide that into two. You've got 300 square metres, 5 minutes from the Broadwater, and you don't need to go out, west and northwest. To enjoy those facilities. Yes, you're not going to get those tax depreciation benefits, which I think people buy properties for the wrong reasons. You want to be happy, you want to be proud when you come home, and you want to be able to work hard, pay that mortgage off, and spend the weekends, at the local beaches, parks, playgrounds in your chosen city.
What about adding value, Tony? In a duplex, can you, say, put another level on it, or can you extend out the back? I mean, is there potential with these properties? Perfect.
Okay, down at Mermaid Waters, there was a duplex. Again, it was a refurbished 2-bed, 1-bath, single lock-up garage. So what Gus has done, he's actually converted the garage to living space and an extra bathroom. So now he has a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom accommodation, and there is still room for car accommodation in front of the duplex. Now, that's 5 minutes walk to Pacific Fair. That one was purchased before the market kind of went crazy in the 400s. So typically you do pay a premium to be south and near the beaches, and you get more bang for buck and value for money at the northern end of the Gold Coast. So adding value, that property would now be worth in probably the mid-5s. So a quick way to add value. And I think it cost Gus around, I hope you don't mind Gus me saying, about $35,000. And, what a way to go.
Plus, he's enjoyed some market upswing in conjunction with that value add strategy. So well done for putting me into that one, Tony. It's a good story to have. Apartments versus houses. So we've talked a little bit about, Karen, you're probably seeing more house opportunities or people taking up the house opportunities on the Sunshine Coast, so north of Brisbane. And Tony, you're looking at, that may be more of an apartment or a duplex, perhaps not that freehold house on its own piece of land. What are the ups and downs, do you think, from each of those, getting closer to the beach, being in an apartment for the same sort of money as being in a house further away from the beach? If a first home buyer was looking at, this being their stepping stone, so they really want to use that capital growth potential towards the next one, what sort of advice would you be giving them as to which way they should go with that?
Karen first.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. It's funny because the worry has always been with apartments that there's just no capital growth in it. And that is still the case in some locations. But I have to say, there aren't many locations in Queensland that have substantial growth in units, but the Sunshine Coast is one of them. So there are certain parts of the Sunshine Coast where growth in units is actually pretty good. And particularly up north around the Noosa beaches, they've had really good growth there in apartments. Yes. And you can still, we put a couple and a young child, a family of 3 moving up from Sydney, doing the whole sea change into a place 400 metres from the beach at Sunrise Beach. And it was low 6s, and that was a 3-bedroom townhouse. And that's 400-metre walk to the beach, and that's a really nice place. And the interesting one with that, just because you were talking about, Tony, interesting conversions and things, this place had a loft. And these people had actually, the people who we bought this from, had closed over the loft and put a cupboard in front of it and never used it. But the people in the townhouse in front had opened up the loft, had plastered it all in, and it had a big round porthole which gave them sea views from the loft. And so I saw this when I was looking through my due diligence at, comparable properties, and I thought, where are they getting this sea view from? And sure enough, I see this window at the top of ours, and I think, how do we get up there? And we discover hidden stairs. It was like a little bit Harry Potter's cupboard type thing.
Wow.
It's very cool.
Wow. That is
every buyer's agent's dream, that one.
Yeah, it was a bonus. So, little things like that. But you can get into the apartment market, and there actually is pretty good growth. And down on the southern end of the coast, if you can't afford that 600 spot, you can get into Kings Beach. And Kings Beach has actually you can get a great property in Kings Beach, particularly some of those older style ones, and do the types of renos and things that Tony was talking about in the older style. You can get in there easily in the 4s and 5s with ocean views. So
talking a 2-bed or a 3-bed, Karen?
Look, you can get some 3-bedders. There's a couple of 3-bedders on at the moment in the early 5s, more original. The 3-bedders are less common because obviously it wasn't a big, 3-bedders back in the day weren't a big thing in apartments. So a lot of the ones along the front there are 2-bedders. But you can get amazing ocean views, and you can get in there, in Kings Beach, you can get in even in the late 3s for a 2-bedroom apartment. You might get a beach glimpse with a beach glimpse. But in the 4s, you can definitely get an ocean view. So,
what's the zoning and what is the potential for more supply to come into that marketplace? Because I guess that's, something you've got to think about in terms of the supply-demand equation. If you're looking to use your first property as a stepping stone, is there a possibility that some of the older places could get knocked down and much bigger complexes be built and bring in much more stock that would have a negative impact on the potential for growth?
There's a few places, and you can see along the beachfront, along Shelley Beach and places like that. There are some new townhouse or apartment blocks going in there where they have knocked down an old block. So there is limitation on how high they can go. So it's very much a different environment than like the Goldie, for example. It's sort of like a race to who can be highest to get over the top of the other high one. And so they've ended up with all these really big buildings, but there's limitations. So that actually don't go up that high, especially along the beachfront itself. You can't go up very high. So
interesting.
Which is important, of course, because the Gold Coast has a bit of a bad reputation for capital growth, shall we say negative capital growth for apartments. And that's largely due to oversupply. Would you agree, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to be so careful when you're buying into the apartment style buildings, you're much better off to buy in a 4 or 6 pack where you've only got 4 or 6 neighbours, and it's that capital growth, that the values in the land that goes up. It's no fun buying in an apartment complex with 150 other units. It's not going to work. That's purely a lifestyle-driven, decision. So, I'd always urge that buyers look for houses first, then the duplexes, and then it just comes down to affordability. If you can't afford it, don't sit on the lounge and forget about it. Get into the market any which way you can, as long as you're buying good value for money in good locations, and you have that significant point of difference. It's just no use buying a dime a dozen unit, because who wants them, really? Supply and demand will kick in every single time, and that's what's happening in this post-COVID market right now that we're all experiencing. So, yeah, spot on. Don't race into buying a dime a dozen apartment or unit.
I just want to pick up on that point that you made, get into anything. And you didn't say get into anything you can. What were the words you used? Just get in, don't sit on the couch, get in there. Yeah, don't wait. Yeah. So maybe it's then about making the right set of compromises that are still going to get you the growth potential, rather than just buying anything to get into the market. I don't think you were going down that path, were you?
No. And Tony did talk about scarcity. And I think what Karen said there about, was it Kings Beach? Did you say that where they've got a height limitation? And of course, these things can change. I guess you've got to be careful that the local councils can actually change the zoning and change the restrictions on development. But that's something you definitely want to look for, is that what's the potential for more and more and more apartments if you're going to buy an apartment? And if there's a cap on that, if there's a cap on the available land, if there's a cap on the actual what they can build on the sites, because the more new apartments that people can fit or developers can fit on a site, the more likely they're going to knock down the older buildings and replace them with bigger, taller, newer buildings. So it preserves the value for the existing stock when you've got limited controls, or the limits. There are limits on what can be developed there. So that these are important things to familiarise yourself with. And I know, Megan, you and I, when we've put together the First Home Buyer Guide course, we go into learning about that sort of stuff, because it's so important. People have been caught out buying apartments across the country, not just, up and down from the coast from Brisbane, and found themselves in a situation where they're 10 years down the track that it's worth less than they paid for it, and they haven't even realised until they've gone to sell it.
There's no getting off that first rung then, is there? You're almost back down on the ground with negative equity.
This is the thing. We talk about getting a firm first rung on the ladder. And I'm like, well, what if your ladder only has one rung? Or, as someone actually said to me the other day, you can drop a ladder over the side of a ship and go down on a ladder. So,
we're trying to make sure people don't do that.
We want you on a really solid ladder that goes up and has got more than one rung. So it's really important.
Now, on that, what are some of the mistakes that you have seen people make, or people could possibly make in these coastal markets? And I know that's quite a general thing, but what are the sorts of things that people should be really, really wary of? We talked about supply and apartments and not buying cookie cutter and all those sorts of things. But, in your markets that you are local experts in, what are some of the things that people really need to be aware of?
Tony, do you want to?
Tony, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think awareness and market knowledge. It's really hard as a first home buyer to, just walk out there and, do a little bit of research and buy the right one, that they think they're buying the right one. I think, knowing the value is the key. If you don't know value, then how can you negotiate? How can you stand firm? No, why would we pay X amount of dollars? Because we know that this one sold, this one sold. So I think getting yourself aware, going through to as many open homes as you can, go to auctions just to know what they're actually selling for, get yourself familiar. So fools rush in, and that will cost you money. Don't pay with your heart. You need to rein your emotions in and just be level-headed about it. And just be careful who you take advice from. Like, there's plenty of Uncle Bobs and Auntie Sues that, give their advice. And I guess you probably need to have a look at, maybe their own portfolio or their successes or what they've actually achieved. Be careful of who you're taking advice from. You know, that's you know, a couple of things that just don't resonate with me. And you know, you want to get the best value for money, and you want to know that you're buying today, knowing the 5 or 10 year plan. Is that property going to go up at a rate of knots in value? Is it going to be able to rent out very easily? You know, because your first home will probably turn into your investment home as you grow with the family and lifestyle changes and life chapters, you know, serve different things, and you want to go to different schools, and, you know, your anchor points might change with work or schools or family.
So what are some of the things, though, Tony, that, I mean, these are great general advice, and we cover that. Yeah. You know, you're preaching from the same hymn book as to what we sing from all the time. But what are some of the specific mistakes you see, particularly with out-of-towners? Because let's face it, you know, there's this sort of move to do the sea change, and, you know, there's a lot of Melburnians. You mentioned a Melburnian that came up and bought their first home up there. You know, there's a lot of move from the southern states to go to Queensland as a result of lockdown, I think. What are some of the things in your area that you see out of towners, those without local knowledge, that they really stuff up, and they just don't see the mistake on the horizon? And definitely we'll get to you, Karen, ask you the same question.
Yeah, because I know main roads, like a road, can be a huge differentiator between the price of a property that's closer to the ocean versus the other side. How would, you know, is that something that people make a mistake, not understanding those really unique differences locally for you?
Yeah, look, there's some areas where people are saying, well, hey, this is really good value, and it does look good value on paper, but do they know that there's going to be a second M1, you know, coming through the coast? You need to be aware of those things. You need to buffer yourself away from those areas. You need to be at least 800 metres away from those localities.
So some infrastructure projects happening that they might not be aware of.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, the disruption that it has, the noise pollution that it has, you know, down at Palm Beach, you know, luckily one of our clients sold very quickly for a good price on the back of the M1, because it was coming, and it is coming. And, you know, we've got to cater for this infrastructure, and it's through the road networks. And if you're not aware and you're looking at the, you know, warm and fuzzies of a home, you need to look at the, you know, the holistic approach. You know, that's local. And also I've seen it last weekend, a property in Burleigh Heads, which is actually the old Stevens. It's another suburb that people probably don't know about. This property should have been, you know, selling for around 800 to 820 at a pinch. You know, I know that it sold for the high eights. You know, that's 10% over. Like, you know,
and why? Why did it sell for more than it should have?
Yeah.
Out of towners, they don't know the value. They compare it to their own city.
Yeah, that's a big one, actually.
Isn't it?
Huge one.
They're panicking. You know, it's not uncommon, you know, to see 30 or 40 groups through the first open home with 10 or 11 multiple offers and, you know, 2 or 3 cash buyers. You know, cash is king, but you need to be smart about it, you know. And
it's thrown away if you're paying 10% overs, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, that's a lot of growth that you have to have. Yeah. Or you could buy in true, you know, Burleigh waters and be sitting on a much more, you know, valuable asset that's going to increase in value at a higher rate of loss. You've got to compare like with like, and it's hard to kind of grasp that if you probably haven't, you know, even been a local for.
You can't just take 2 3-bed 1-bath houses on 600 square metres and say, well, that one's sold for that, therefore this one's worth that, because, you know, it may be that there's a big block of apartments being built next door. It may be that, as I say, the M1 is coming through and the noise corridor is going to increase. So that local knowledge, I think, Tony, you've just absolutely nailed it, is what causes people to perhaps pay that 10% instead of understanding where real market value sits for a property.
And it's really common too, that idea, you're taking your capital city mentality and you're taking it to the regions, and you think, oh my God, like Karen, when you mentioned you can get an ocean view apartment for 400,000, you know, here I am in Sydney, go, oh my God, I want to go and buy one, because you're thinking, you know, you do do. You compare it to where you come from, where you're familiar, but that's a massive mistake. And so, Karen, have you got any other specific sort of local mistakes that you see out of towners or people that don't have the local knowledge making?
I think one would be just not understanding the distances. So if you're moving from busy Sydney and you travel 40 Ks into work every day and that's your norm, and you think, I'm going to move to the Sunshine Coast, look at this amazing property, it's only 40 Ks from the beach. That's very, very different. So
did people really say that?
Well, yeah, because like a lot of people sort of get taken with nice house and land.
Even just saying 10 Ks.
Well, yeah, in Landsborough, for example, Landsborough is a really good example. You know, nice new houses getting built there, and it looks like a nice little place, and they're very shiny and new. But it's on the other side of the Bruce Highway. It's not even on the beach side of the highway, and that technically it's 15, 20 minutes drive, which doesn't sound much if you commute an hour and a half in Sydney to work, but it's not the same here. So you've got to just understand that if you're moving to the Sunshine Coast to be near the beach, you need to actually be near the beach. So don't get, you know, don't get.
Oh, we need to write that down. That's a closer.
Don't get sucked in and using your own reference points from where you're coming from for distance. Like understand what is too far to commute. Like you're not going to drive your kids to school on that school over there for 25 minutes.
Yes, it's locally relative, isn't it? It's not what you've got used to and what you're prepared to accept. It has to be locally relative.
And you'll get here and then you'll be very disappointed after a while that you're so far from the beach. So
recalibrate. You got to recalibrate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be very similar to what Tony mentioned is you need to understand the pricing point because you will get sucked in by the view. Because like I went to a place literally yesterday, I inspected a property for someone and the view was spectacular. It was absolute ocean front. This place was only $720,000 and actually that's what I assessed it to be. And then when I actually found out what they were asking for, it was $850. But the view is amazing. If you stand in that place as a person who's not familiar and go, this is amazing, I have absolute 180 degrees ocean in front of me,
right?
And you pay $850, you've just done 130K of your dough. So don't get sucked in by the view. Like Tony said, do your research on the pricing. And I made a very similar mistake. The first house I ever bought in my life many years ago, I did a very similar thing and just thought, oh, well, this house is great and that seems like a good price and the suburb next door is so much, you know, more expensive. And so I bought in this cheaper one and I paid about 40 grand too much for it. Like I just didn't do the research on what that suburb was worth. I was comparing it to the other one, like just didn't know.
And it was so much better value when you compared it.
Yeah, and like I owned that house for a very long time, but I probably spent the first 5 years catching up what I lost, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, great advice. That's a really good example to use for people. Speaking of, Tony mentioned, you know, maybe that first property that you purchase eventually becomes an investment property as you move along in your life stages and go into different properties. What are rent vesting options for first home buyers like? You know, what sort of things can they perhaps consider in that $500,000 or $600,000 price range? Because you have to think about yield, you have to think about rental income and as well as growth when you're looking at that. So, Tony, what are the rents like on the Gold Coast comparative to purchase price?
Yeah, no, look, the good thing about it is if you can secure a house under $600,000, you're going to get dollar for dollar or 5%, you know, returns. You're going to get your $550 back from the $500,000.
Is that right?
Wow.
Yes. Actually, Karen, I'm not sure about the northern coast, but at the Gold Coast, there's a rental crisis at the moment. Right. And, you know, some property managers that this is just after Christmas, have had 600 properties on their rent roll and they've only had 2 or 3 available to show for rent. So it's also, a little bit of a catch where people are selling their properties and then they don't know where to go. You know, they've got to either rent somewhere or try and find another property. But there is a rental crisis. So that, like buying a house in Varsity for $950,000, it's going to be rented for $950. You know, I think that's a bit overcooked. I think it should be close to that $850 mark. But people are missing out, and people are paying $100 more a week in some instances just to secure properties. So be aware of that.
Is the story
It's very
different
true.
for apartments though?
Yeah, there's more to choose from with apartments. But when it comes to ground levels, single levels, they're very popular. Apartments, they're dime a dozen in the middle. So ground levels are going to go first. But, people with pets, there's so many people that have got the dog or the cat or the caboodle.
The COVID pet.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's also a factor to take into consideration. How many rentals are there with a backyard? With rentvesting, just to expand on it, there is a trend of people who are moving north to buy an investment now to secure their home. So they're buying it as an investment, securing a position, and then they're moving up. Before COVID come along, that was pretty common for Melbourne and Sydney people to think 5 years ahead. But now they're fast forwarding their plans to, the 1 year or 18 months or, even 6 month plan now.
Do you find that? So we're certainly seeing that in Brisbane as well, and we're largely hearing from our clients at Property Pursuit that the reason they're doing it is that they have now been able to really genuinely work from home, and so their need to be in the capital cities where the higher paying jobs are has actually, largely in many companies, not every company is doing this, but they can actually just commute maybe once or twice a month or a couple of days a week or whatever the case may be. So the lifestyle factor, is really hitting home. Is that what you're seeing on the Gold Coast, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. So they want a Zoom room or a space.
Zoom room. Love it.
Or a studio or a place where they can, detach themselves and have a home office, so to speak. So super important. It comes high on the criterion list as well. So, yeah, that's an absolute valid point. And it's like the fly in, fly outs, they often like to base themselves, in places where they want to, come up and relax, but then they work hard. Now, different professions and COVID has, unveiled Zooming. You don't need to travel. You don't need to go into the office. You can, wear your shorts like I am. And
Tony, have you just gone to the waist, have you? So
I just had a through in the Broadwater before, so just to start the day, it was lovely. But it's a whole new world out there, and it's quite exciting, I think, for the next 10 years to come. People don't need to be anchored in
the bigger capital cities necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's right. Especially if they can work from home. Yeah, power to them. That's great.
Fabulous.
Right, we got Karen's rejoined us from her cupboard with the amazing view.
I don't know. I reckon she's gone for a swim. She's gone out. She's ducked out. She's checked out the beach. Checked the waves.
It was getting warm in the cupboard.
Yeah, so she's back, and so we want to know about rentvesting options in the Sunshine Coast, Karen. And I guess prefacing this too, we know that there's a lot of holiday apartment rental, stock up there and in the Gold Coast as well. So of course, with COVID, has a lot of that hit the market for long-term rental. Has that changed the landscape in the apartment side of things? Is it like similar to the Gold Coast where you've got a sort of two different markets? You've got the apartment market for renting and the house market for renting.
Now, look, I don't think it's quite as pronounced on the coast. We definitely have a rent issue here at the moment. There's no vacancies and, there's just nothing to rent. There's no supply and you can't get in. So we have a lot of, people on Facebook groups crying out for I'm going to be homeless soon and all that sort of stuff. The housing market, definitely that's the case. The apartment market, it's still the case to some extent. There's not as many, I guess, as the Gold Coast. And I'm talking probably more the southern end of the coast, but even with the northern end of the coast, when COVID hit, a lot of people took their stuff from the holiday market and put it into the permanent market. So there were quite a few, but I don't think there was a massive oversupply. There's still the Noosa end of things. I don't know how pronounced, their rental shortage is or if it is, but certainly the southern end of the coast, you can't get a house to rent for love nor money or an apartment, even a good apartment. So
I think it's important, though, that we're talking about rent vesting options, but I guess what I want to sort of say here is that these circumstances can change. This isn't going to necessarily be always the case. So don't rush and buy a house up in the Gold Coast or the Sunshine Coast thinking, oh my God, that's how I'm going to actually, get my first rung on the ladder. I'm going to rent it out. It's going to secure my future, because it could be that this is a relatively, in the whole scheme of things, a short to medium term shortage, brought on by a bit of migration through COVID and all the rest of it? Or would you say fundamentally, looking back over the last 5 to 10 years, there's always been a supply shortage?
I think there's always been a supply on the sunny coast, a shortage, and we've ran rental agencies in Brisbane and on the coast, and the coast has always run with a much lower vacancy rate generally, but I certainly think at the moment it's much more pronounced. But yes, it's always runs low vacancies on the sunny coast as long as I've been there. So,
and is that mainly houses, Karen?
Yeah, mostly houses, but still good apartments to some extent as well. And particularly like we were mentioning Kings Beach before, that area has become a lot more, even the apartment market is a lot more owner-occupier now. There's a lot of, I live in an apartment building in Kings Beach, and it's mostly older people, and that's where they downsize to.
Right.
So,
what sort of yields? You're talking about 5%.
Yeah, look, you'd probably get 5%, I reckon, there as well. In houses on the Sunshine Coast, if you're trying to sneak close to the beach, your yield's going to go down a bit, because you're probably, it's just going to be a high price to get in there.
Yeah. Land content, you'd pay much for here. Land, the closer you get to the beach, if it's a good location.
Yeah, correct. But certainly if you're off the other side, like for example, around where the new hospital precinct is, when I say new, it's been there now a couple of years, but there's a lot of new housing around there, and that would yield at 5% pretty easily. Yeah.
And just for our listeners, we talk about yield, and what yield is a percentage of the rental income versus the actual property price. Now, obviously there's various lessons to be learnt and understood throughout property, and one of the general rules is that the higher the yield, so the more rent you get, typically comes at the expense of capital growth. And so it's just something to be very mindful of. If you're getting a high yield, if you're getting a high percentage or high proportion of rent versus the price you're paying, you need to be very careful about going after the yield and at the expense of capital growth, particularly as a first home buyer, because you have a long runway, and that means many, 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 many years of property ownership, and you really want capital growth and compounding interest and all that sort of stuff to work in your favor. So just be aware of these things. These are concepts we teach in the course. So, we're giving you this information, but we just want you to sort of also understand, don't jump on a little tiny bit of the information.
Do the big picture.
Do the big picture. Learn about all of it.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to mention too that's maybe specific to holiday locations like the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, and I don't know if this is the same for you, Tony, but you have to be a little bit careful if people are like rent vesting and they're trying to get into something that they think short-term rental accommodation is a great thing, Airbnb and that sort of thing. Councils can change their rules, and we've seen that recently in Noosa. So the rules are such that certain zonings, if you can pick up a great apartment in a certain zone, but if it's a low-density zone, you cannot get an approval because you have to go through a council process to get short-term rental accommodation approval, and they won't give it in a low-density area. So just make sure you understand the council's rules and regulations around short-term rental accommodation, because with Airbnb, I think that's become a big thing.
Such a golden tip, that one. Fantastic.
That's a nugget.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And on the flip side, if you're buying an apartment that is specifically for that short-term rental market, you are going to suffer in terms of capital growth, because the only sort of person wanting to buy it is going to be an investor, and you're closing up your future market down the track should you want to sell that property. So all these intricacies are so important, but I love the fact you brought that up, Karen. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, well, we're going to wrap up, and we'd just love to hear something crazy you've seen buyers or a buyer do in your time, because you're both very experienced buyers agents. You've been specialists in your market for a long time. Tell us about something absolutely off the charts crazy that you've seen a buyer do.
Tony, first up.
Oh, hit me. Okay. Look, there's a couple of things, people that are buying sight unseen. I mean not seen at all. Haven't had anyone go to the property. because they're FOMOs. They're fearful of missing out. It's a no-go zone because, seriously, why would you buy a house, in the 800s that has been rented? Who knows what, it is. And they are committing themselves cash, unconditional, to buy a property because they don't want to miss out and they don't want to contend with the 40 other people that will go to that open home on the weekend. So
and they're relying on the agent's pictures and the videos, aren't they? The agent that's working for the seller. So they need someone like you out there, Tony, looking at it for them, so that they've got some personal eyes on it, some representation on it.
It's good to see the good, but it's great to see the bad, the ugly. Keep your eyes wide open. Yeah. At least you get yourselves a building and pest inspection. They'll take photos of hairline cracks and all sorts of things so that you are aware. And another thing that happened just recently, talking about a location, lifestyle location, on the Tallebudgera Creek, a home went to market. It had 108 routes through the property. It sold within 2 weeks. I would have pegged it at about 2.8. There was 3 offers over 3 million. It sold for 3.3.
Woo.
And someone else was prepared to buy the property for 3.55, but they'd got a building and pest and must have got cold feet. But these are the crazy things that are happening.
I can't calculate that. I'm reckoning, is that a 20% premium?
Oh.
At least.
30. Yeah, Yeah. No, well, look, that from pre-COVID would be a 20 to 30% premium. But just recently, just in that whirlwind of people missing out, that's a solid 10%, isn't it?
FOMO is a bad
Such a bad thing.
Bad thing. Karen, you got any example, any crazy things?
Oh, look, I don't know if it's crazy, but I guess this one is taking advice from agents and then on the flip side, not taking advice from agents. So, for example, I've seen many home buyers go through a property that's had a whole bunch of people through it, and my ears are tuned to what's going on around me. I hear the agent telling the buyer that, oh yeah, you'll need to be in the 6s to get this, and I'm walking through thinking this is a 520 house, and so they're like, oh okay, yep. And I can see they're going to go and give him an offer in the 6 because he said to give them an offer in the 6.
Yeah.
So be really careful who you're taking your advice from. Do your own research. And then on the flip side of that, not taking advice from agents. So I see a lot of people who they know that they can't trust the agent, so they don't trust a single thing the agent says. So when there's 12 offers being handed in and the agent says, this is a multiple offer, give us your best offer, they think, oh, we'll give them the best offer minus 50 grand.
Yeah.
And it's gone. And they wonder why they missed it. So sometimes the agent might be out to get you, but sometimes they're not. So it's hard to know what to believe and what not to. But, just be careful who you're taking advice from. But sometimes the advice might be right. So
sometimes
I don't know how they're going to.
Yeah. Welcome to the crazy world of trying to buy a property. No wonder you've been listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you. It's great to get insights into markets outside capital cities. This is our first regional spotlight episode, and we're really thrilled that you've joined us. We're going to be doing more, so keep an eye out for us, and even send us via the website homebuyeracademy.com.au. Send us a message about an area that you'd like us to spotlight.
Yep. And it's all about getting local experts to give you local knowledge in this podcast, because there is absolutely no replacement for local knowledge when you're looking around. So, Veronica and I know our areas really well, but we know the people who know their areas really well. And we've really been grateful to have you on, Tony and Karen. So thank you.
Thank you.
We will hopefully catch up again maybe later in the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
In this episode, we've covered a very small part of our 10-step online course for first home buyers. If you would like to learn more about the process and how to buy without making a mistake, then head over to our website, www.homebuyeracademy.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you like what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. 5 stars would be wonderful. It will help others find us as well.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with some more priceless stuff.